Hello, everyone. My name is 12 Gauge, and this is my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. If you're looking for the podcast to keep your attention, to keep the exciting topics coming, you've come to the right place. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for being here and spending your Friday evening with me and my special guest, Carla. And tonight we have a very good show planned for you. The podcast is going to be discussing over the toxicity of love versus crossing the fine line of addiction into other forms of very dysfunctional existence. So I'm going to bring Carla up right now, and we're going to start off introducing her. Good evening, Carla.
Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody's doing good on this Friday night.
All right, all right. So, you've been on the channel before, and I know that you mentioned that you have various degrees in behavior and all that good stuff. So you're well versed about this topic, are you not?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Okay, well, like I said, it's just a podcast where both of us are just discussing what it means to have the toxic love of another, or if it has crept into an addictive area. So signs of love addiction, here's some of them. One of them could be mistaking intense sexual experiences and new romantic excitement for love. Another one could be constantly craving and searching for a romantic relationship. When in a relationship, you become desperate to please and fearful of the other's unhappiness. When not in a relationship, you feel desperate and alone. You have an inability to maintain an intimate relationship once the newness and excitements have worn off. You find it unbearable or emotionally difficult to be alone. When not in a relationship, you compulsively use sex and fantasy to fill the loneliness. You choose partners who are emotionally unavailable or verbally or physically abusive. You choose partners who demand a great deal of attention and caretaking, but who do not meet or even try to meet your emotional or physical needs. You participate in activities that don't interest you or go against your personal values in order to keep or to please a partner. So we'll stop right there and we'll talk about the others. But that's a hell of a laundry list, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's big. It's a lot
It
of
is, right?
information.
Yes, it's a hell of a laundry list. Um, I'm gonna start off by saying yes, I have known people like this. I have probably been like this in some shape, fashion in my lifetime. How about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, none of us are perfect. That's the big thing, right? Whether we were the toxic person or whether we were the victim of it, but none of us are perfect, and we're human. So definitely, I have been a part. I would probably have been on both sides of the fence,
Right.
at some time in my life.
This kind of is a core that branches off into multitudes of dysfunction. You have codependency, you have sex addiction, you have, domestic violence issues, you have all kinds of stuff that stem from being toxic with the
Hmm.
partner.
Hmm.
Have
Yeah,
you
and I
ever
think it.
go
I
ahead?
think it. Yeah, I think it goes back to when we look at it from a professional standpoint, right? It kind of goes back to your attachment style,
Okay.
and that goes back to your childhood. How did you attach or didn't attach? What the early um how was love modeled in your home? Because I mean, we covet what we see, so that stems from that. So if you're coming from a home that perhaps didn't model good, it goes back to, before we talk about like dependency, codependent, or anything like that. What's important too is how are people attached? What type of parents did you have, when you were growing up? Do you do you recognize the different parenting styles? Because those different parenting styles in the very beginning are going to are the causes of how you attach. Did you attach securely or did you not attach securely?
Oh,
So it just stems back, like it goes back to childhood sometimes, when we're gonna, break it down, like how are you going to, what is the projection going to be? Are you going to be a toxic lover or a victim of it, or are you gonna, it just goes back. It's fascinating, when you look at it from the psychological point of view.
of course it is because for a lot of people they go into therapy, they don't really understand or even remember what it was like growing up in their homes, because I mean, if somebody puts you on the spot and says, Carla, tell me what it was like in your home at 4 years old, aren't you going to have to think about it a little bit?
Oh yeah, well, the thing about it is that not only do you have to think about it, right? But a lot of that when we were little, for those people that perhaps, grew up in a chaotic home, you know, it we and I struggle to say this word a lot. It's we have compartmentalized a lot of that. So you're basically asking somebody, hey, can you go back into that space where you've locked everything away and open it up, like a Pandora's box?
Okay.
Because the mind does that. We try to protect ourselves, so we tend to forget a lot of it, or we're not quite like, we say just comments like, oh yeah, my childhood was fine. We tend to just remember the good things, but then when you talk to other friends, you tend to really, that's where you really see like, oh wow, they're remembering certain aspects. I don't have those memories,
Right.
because those things probably didn't happen. Or once you really start to really dig in there and start to really think, then you start to really see, oh, this is why, my parents were this, or or that, or whatever. It's
Well,
hard.
you work with children. I work
Yeah.
with juveniles. You
Hmm.
have to speak to them on a total different realm of understanding. You have to talk to them as if, they can visualize what it is that you're trying to explain to them. So if you say, what type of family did you grow up? Well, to them, their family that they know right now might be normal. But if they tell you, well, I don't really eat a lot of meals. I don't, I don't I don't brush my teeth, or, I don't do this, that, and the other. To somebody listening to that, they're going to say, well, there's neglect, obviously, right? But
Mm-hmm.
to the child, if they're growing up in that environment, they're not really understanding that that is dysfunctional. And that's the hard part, is getting individuals to understand the dysfunction of how they were raised, what happened, and how did it continue to become a pattern in their life that caused them to grow up to be a certain way. Would you say that that's
Hmm.
correct? Like,
Yeah.
what the cliff note of what you just said?
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think you hit the nail on the head for sure. I mean, because we only know what we know. That's it. We only know what we know, and depending on what age we're talking about, if we're talking about little kids or even juveniles, if that is all you have been around, that you only know what you know. So it's not until we start to step away, and until we're in our adolescent years, where we're starting to become who we want to become, and we're starting to get influenced by our friends, and we start to be around other people, when we start to love other people outside of our family unit, and we start to see and go visit other people's homes, then do we start to really see how others live, and then that's when we start to compare, like, wait a minute, what do you mean, like, and this is just me totally making things up, but it's going to be like, oh, what do you mean, your mom is a doctor, and and isn't home when you're home, or you start to notice difference, or just those discrepancies, and you're just like, oh, I thought everybody's mom stayed at home, because typically, in Hispanic cultures, the mom stays at home and cares for the house and cares for the kids. I didn't grow up that way. My mom had to work, so my mom worked. So, whenever I, now as an adult, I think back, and my mom's like, hey, you need to find you somebody, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't even know how to be a housewife. I don't, I was taught that you work. So I work.
Right.
If you were to tell me, Carla, you know, I'm meeting Prince Charming here, and, let's say he tells me, okay, I make enough money, you're going to stay at home. I think I would go crazy, because I'm like, I didn't grow up watching my mom do that. Now as an adult, um even when I got cancer, my mom was here, and we brought my mom so she could cook my meals. And it's like, what do you mean you had your mom cook your meals? I'm like, well, yeah, because I mean I can cook, but I don't want to cook, and so to some people
Right.
it's like, oh my gosh, so we only know what we know, so yeah,
But you
so
brought
yeah.
up you brought up an interesting point there. You did talk about culture. Different
Yeah,
cultures have different type of radiuses to either show love, show affection, or to just have the distances of, well, this is the culture. Well, in the Asian culture, you don't make eye contact. It's
that's
very
true.
rude to make eye contact. So
That's true.
in certain cultures, they're not. I mean, I've noticed that a lot of people in the different generations since I've gotten older, the touch, the human touch is not as existent as it once was. Like there's a lot of people that they don't like to be hugged. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? They don't like to be, you can put your, tap them on the shoulder, and they kind of flinch. And
Mhm.
it's always been foreign to me because I'm a toucher, I like to be hugged. I like to, that's very comforting for me. And
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in a family like that. We didn't go around hugging. We would hug, but it would be because an event was happening. It wasn't
Yeah.
just, well, I run up and hug you, I run up and kiss you, or run up and say I love you. There was not a lot of that shown.
Yeah.
So when you grow up like that, you either go one or two directions, like you say. You either maintain that or you go looking for it like a drug.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I
So
totally agree.
that's what we're talking about tonight, about the toxic trait that a lot of people go looking for. You know, let me ask you point blank, just very, very direct. Do you believe that young girls have an ideal of a romantic partner to be almost envisioned of daddy? Like, not daddy, but honest, hardworking, loving, caring. Did you have an envisioned mindset about your Prince Charming? Was your dad anywhere in the picture?
I think for me personally, no. I mean,
Mm.
I think that my dad wasn't, the best, role model. Whenever now, and looking at my dad from the adult lens, not looking at my dad from like the daughter lens,
Yeah,
because it's two separate people, right? Whenever we get to a certain part in our lives, we start to really look at our parents as people,
right.
and so looking at my dad from that point of view, and looking back into the past, that the last thing that I ever wanted was to ever find someone like my dad. As there was a lot of qualities of my dad then that, that I was like, oh hell no. Now that was then. My dad has changed a lot over the years, and everything. When he became saved and became a Christian, and even now, there's he's human, and things happen, but more than a lot of it, he has really changed his life. So even the dad that I'm speaking about today, he doesn't exist anymore. It's not who my dad is today, but who my dad was growing up, and during probably the time where I probably maybe as a young woman probably needed my dad the most. My dad wasn't there. He was there in a very authoritative kind of manner, but not in a way that that I would have, that I probably, now looking back, that you know Kay the teenager would have wanted him to be like. And when we've had conversations, it has come up, where my dad has said, well, I don't know, you know, I don't know how to be that way. And, has forgiven, has asked me for forgiveness or whatever. So yeah, so I just think it's just who he was and who he is. And for me, I stayed away from that. So, so yeah, so I mean, that's just, how for me, that was just hard, so, but yeah.
Did you miss me? Did you notice I was
Yeah,
gone?
no, I did not. I was sitting here, I was like closing my eyes, like just really into my thought that I was giving. And I looked at, I was like, oh my gosh.
I don't know. My computer just made a 3D um like a robotic sound, and it booted everything, and I was like, "What the
Uh-uh.
hell?" And then I had to reboot, and so I'm back. That was wild. I agree with everything you said. Everything, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question, okay? Let's keep it simple for the chat. Have you ever been love bombed?
Oh yeah, for sure.
What does
Oh
that mean to
yeah.
you? What does that mean to you?
Oh my gosh. For me, I think, when it happened to me, yeah, I didn't know it was happening. I mean, when you get, I did not know it was happening. I wasn't aware that it was happening. I was very unaware of that. Looking back on it now, I can tell you, oh yeah, I was love bombed completely. I mean, and for me, I didn't. It was, you know, it was a person I got involved with, shouldn't have never got involved with, but this person was a narcissist. And so what we know about narcissists, people who have narcissistic tendencies and things like that, is that they are very charming, and they love bomb, and it made me feel good because I gave the recipe to who I am very, very
Okay.
freely,
We have a question. We have a question in the chat. They don't know what a love bomb is. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so a love bomb is basically, so it's like you give through conversation, this person will keep you talking, right? And they are listening to everything that you're saying. So, like, let's say they ask me a question like, "Hey, do you like this or do you like that or whatever?" Next thing you know, they're bringing that to you, or they're very agreeable. You know what? I really like the color green. And then oh, me too. Me too. I love the color green. I love the color green. Oh, I love this. Everything you love, they love. So it gives you a false sense of, oh, I met somebody that, we're so alike, we're so alike. And we don't realize in the moment that that is not who they are. So
Okay,
they're getting all of
so
the,
they're misrepresenting
yeah.
who they are. They're mirroring your being so that they can be the person who um they believe that you want them to be, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
And they'll
if you tell me, look, you know what? I really saw a dress today that I wanted, but I can't afford it. And I asked, well, what was it? Was it a couture? Was it, I don't even know, some dress brand, but whatever. And you tell me,
mhm.
and then next thing you know, tomorrow it's on your doorstep wrapped up in bows.
Mhm. Oh
Is
yeah.
that, is that
So
a
that
love bomb?
yeah, that's definitely a form of love bombing. Another form of love bombing that's a little bit more that gets a little bit more more in depth is, Carla, tell me about, your dad. As I just revealed earlier, hey man, when I was little, my dad wasn't probably the best. Well, what does that tell that person? Well, Carla, well, do you want kids? I want kids. Me too. You know, everything is a me too, me too, me too. But little, they start to gather little information. So if they know that, okay, well, hey, Carla had a kind of a rough childhood, she's going to put up with a lot. So I'm gonna love bomb her. I'm gonna tell her everything, and then I'm gonna start pulling her and pulling her and pulling her more and more away from her family. But they first have to get to you, and they
Okay,
get to you
okay.
by marrying you.
So the love bomb is the attachment, putting
Yeah.
your claws, the attachment to you.
Oh
And once
yeah.
I'm attached, then I start to control you, right?
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
you're so involved with not mine, but like whoever's version of this romantic fairy tale that you've always been told. This person is fitting every box.
Every box.
And
They
you're
will
like,
make themselves. Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, one day you're way over here. You
Mm-hmm.
no longer go to happy hour with your girlfriends.
Right.
You never go have coffee with your sister or her friends or whatever. You never go to the movies anymore. You never go to the book club. You never go work out. Never. You stop doing all this stuff because everything revolves around this one person. They
Mm-hmm.
had you over here when you started, but
Mm-hmm.
slowly they move you away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then when you're over here, what are you? You're what?
You're in trouble. Molly, you in
Tr-
danger.
Yeah, you're
You're in trouble. You're in trouble because you tend to what well, it's kind of like a tug and pull, right? So in the beginning, they're very nice. They're everything you want them to be. Like for I'll give an example. So what happened with me with love bombing? This person would I'm a talker. If you know me, I'm a talker and my personal life. I mean, I would rather talk on the phone. If you are a texter, it's not going to get very far with me because it's going to be like, hey, how are you? Fine. Like, I'm not a texter. I don't like to text. A lot of that goes back to I have dyslexia too, so I really just the texting I don't particularly like. If you want to get to know me, you got to have time to talk to me because I'm a talker. So this person figured that out very quickly about me, and they would stay hours on the phone with me and talk to me and talk to me and talk. Come to find out though, once I'm in it, right? Once I'm already in it. I mean, I'm already in it. I'm already, in it to win it or whatever. I want to call them. Hey, how are you? Can I just see you at home? I mean, I just got off work. I am obviously on my way home. Can we just talk at home? Like, oh wow, what was once, in the beginning, I would call you and we would talk, and because you're on your way home, I'm on my way home, and we would have these wonderful conversations. Now I haven't changed. I call you because that's what we've been doing. And now all of a sudden it's please. Can we just wait till we get home? You don't need to call me when you get every day when you get off of work. So then it kind of throws the person off balance a little bit, right? Because in the beginning, that's what we did. That was part of the love bombing. They figured out that that was important to me, so they loved bomb me, and they did that one thing, and they got me used to it, and then they pulled the rug from underneath my feet.
yeah,
Because now
they
it's
start
like,
to push you away
right, now it's like, wait
because
a minute, you don't like that? I thought you liked to talk on the phone. I don't want to talk on the phone all the time, Kay. Like, golly, we live together. We don't have to talk on the phone. And then it gives you that sense of, okay, I am not standing on steady ground. And then 2 weeks later, they're calling me, hey, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm on my way home. Oh, yeah. Well, tell me about your day and blah, 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 blah. And so I get a glimpse of, oh, there's that person that I fell in love with. So I get a little glimpse of that. And then I go chasing that high. I go chasing that high. And then next couple of days, why are you calling me? Why are you calling me? I
well
mean, blah, blah,
well
blah,
this is your adult mind talking right now, okay? This is your
Yeah.
adult mind. If any younger people are watching, or should they watch this in the future, what would you recommend? Because let's give the audience a little history. You and I met when we were really young, right? We
Uh-huh.
were friends, like you're talking
Yeah.
about. We would talk on the phone for hours
Yeah.
and
That has not
then
changed. That's
and
still me.
I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh
that's
my
still
god,
me.
is she talking about me right now?" And I'm like,
Oh no.
"No, but like we used to talk on the phone, and when you're young,
Mhm.
that equals connection to a lot of young
Mhm.
people. You got to keep that connection. So
Mhm.
the one day that I call or you call, and I'm
Mhm.
like, God, I'm playing a video game, or my friends are here, we
Uh-huh.
want to go hang out, whatever. No, I didn't date her. We went to prom. We went to prom together. We
Mhm.
tried to, it was one of those young things. It really wasn't. I don't know how you would describe it, Kate, but I mean,
Mhm.
it was one of those things that we drove each other crazy. That's what it was.
Mhm.
I was an alcoholic and she was okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, so as a young person, you're getting connected really fast because that's usually what happens.
Mhm.
So if you learn that as an adolescent,
Mhm.
and then you start to get that push and pull from the other person
Mhm.
to this person over here who wasn't raised with the push and pull, what did it do to them? Okay.
No, it's gonna send them spiraling. It's
It
gonna
scars
definitely
it scars them, doesn't it?
oh yeah, for sure. For
It turns
sure.
them.
For
We were
sure.
talking
But
about
I
the
mean
mirror. We were
but I mean,
talking about the
yeah,
mirror.
yeah, but I think, you
This
know,
person becomes this person.
mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think too though, I mean, to be clear, for the people in the chat, to be clear, uh when what Marty is talking about, we were kids, we were teenagers, and we've maintained, friendships, and everything, throughout the years. And I think, you know uh when I think back about on my childhood and my adolescent years, you were a big part of that. I think that I was, trying to see who I was, and and those things. But I mean, when we're talking about this, we're talking about, we were teenagers. We were
Yeah.
teenagers. We were trying to see who we were. I mean, at the time, Marty was a football player, and I was just trying to figure out, my way, around, so, what we're talking about, that was a very innocent part
Yes,
of
it is.
my childhood. We were very, very innocent with one another and things. And as we grew, as your life took on one direction, and my life took on many, many other directions. But you know uh that I wouldn't if somebody were to say, Was that okay? Well, Carla, was that toxic?" No, that was very innocent. That was not toxic. That was just very
I
innocent.
mean, you know, if you look back on it, I thought during that point in time, I thought that, there was, I don't know, it was just like you're saying, it was just that moment in time when you're trying to figure out who you
Mhm.
are, what you're about. I mean, you
Mhm.
don't really know if you really like the I mean, you like this person, you don't know if you're in love. You know what I mean? It wasn't anything like
Mhm.
that. It was like, well, I was doing my thing, you were doing your thing. We'd sit there and talk on the phone. We went to prom
Mhm.
together. I mean, it was, we went out and hung out. I mean, we were friends. We were,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
I
then
mean, and I
and then
remember
we went
having a
off to
lot of
the
conversations with you. I
yeah,
remember that. I mean, I remember there was always and there always has been. So, like with you, Marty, you've been a very constant person in my life, and sometimes I'll get upset or things like that. But if I sit down, I know that I can have a very good conversation with you. And that just goes just like now. I mean, you could call
think
me up and be like, "Hey, come up on the panel," and
yeah,
the audience is going to think, "Wow," and it's really, this is just us talking. I mean, there was no, there wasn't, we don't do much preparing, let's put it that way. So, but sometimes when people, people like I know you, and I feel comfortable with you. You can get up and talk about delicate things, because you have that trust with that person. So I trust Marty with things that
yeah,
I may be a little bit vulnerable with vulnerability, that I may not trust and be so forthcoming if I just met somebody new. I'm not going to divulge. So I think for the young audience, if there's young people out there, my advice is going to be, be careful what you share. In the beginning, don't give away the recipe to your heart. That person has to earn it. Don't be so quick to
right,
say
right.
you like things, because then if that person has ill intention, if that person has ill intentions, then
Well,
yeah, they can love bomb you.
I think the difference in today's generation than back then. I mean, obviously we had the landlines, and this
Mm-hmm.
generation they have the cell phones. They have, the 5 minute conversation, and then it's like, will you send me a pic? Will you send me a
Yeah.
pic? And
Yeah.
a
Mhm.
lot of this generation is sexualized, and that's where I believe that a lot of the dysfunction
Mhm.
happens, because you're trying to
Mhm.
figure out, you're living as a adolescent, but you're trying to be in an adult mindset, which those
Mhm.
things never work out well.
Yeah. And I think that, nowadays, they have an added pressure, which is social
Yeah,
media. The social media, people get on social media and you're in a relationship for that perfect pick, and people romanticize that, and come to find out that that is far from what the real what is really happening, because you can take some really amazing pictures, and be like, oh, I love her, I love him, and we're just in love and we're perfect and blah blah blah. But that's a facade. That was, so and the influencers, there's people out there that, uh, you follow a couple and you're following them because you're like, oh my gosh, he is the best husband, she is the best wife, look at them. We're only catching a very scripted, probably a lot of the times very scripted, small piece of their lives, and we romanticize that. So then we have that, that's what I want, and you're chasing something that doesn't exist, because none of us are perfect, we all have our
right.
flaws,
But
and
when does it? What I mean, do you remember the Jessica Simpson story where they followed her around? They did the reality TV show with her, and what was her husband's name?
oh,
It was
the just,
Jessica Simpson and Nick Lachey,
yeah,
where they used to
yeah.
have that show on MTV or VH1, and they used to do reality TV. Well, when
Mm-hmm.
you look at Jessica Simpson, her image was very bubblegum, very, very,
Mm-hmm.
approachable. Nick, on the other hand, was a little trying to be a little rough around the edges, kind of like Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
look at their images and you think, well, that's what American girls do. That's what the American girl is. But
Yeah.
what we're talking about, the difference is, from the image to the reality, is so dark sometimes.
Yeah. And when you and I were growing up, we didn't have social media. I mean, it was not there. So now it's very different. Like now, I don't know that I could survive being a
Yeah.
teenager, nowadays. I don't know how they do it. I have my niece, and my niece, she turned 20, and my niece started crying, and she this for real happened. She started crying. She turned 20, this girl, and she's on a scholarship to one of the colleges, and she started crying, and I was like, what's going on? And she was like, well, I don't want to be an adult. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, it was so, and I don't want to be an adult, I don't want to grow up, I'm not ready. And I was thinking back, girl, at 20, I ran away from home at 17. The last time I lived with my parents was when I was 17. So at your age, I was already working, already figuring out my life already, and you're over here talking about crying. Literally,
Mhm.
she cried because she doesn't want to be an adult. She doesn't. She's just not ready. And I was like, you are 20. So it's a whole different. I can't relate, because adolescents, man, they go through some tough
So
times.
do you believe that a lot of adolescents cling to stability that they might not have at home, that this eventually turns into the toxic love?
Yeah, because I mean, I fear for my niece, because I think, hindsight 2020, right? You look back, and so I'll give you guys a quick thing. So I just revealed, I left home when I was 17. I ran away and left home because I thought I knew it all at 17. Oh, well, I was very stupid at 17, but in that moment, I thought I knew it all. So my brother, so as a result, I left home. So my baby brother, who is a lot younger than me, he grew up, you know, with his older sister that left. So that made such a big impression on my brother that when he had his family, he made his home very comfortable for all of his kids, for all three of the kids. I mean, the kids have everything they've ever wanted. They've each had their own televisions, their own PlayStations, like all of these toys, and they grew. I mean, my brother kept his kids, because he didn't want them to grow up too fast because he was a kid, because I grew up too fast and he didn't want what happened with me to happen to him, so he didn't want his daughter at 17 to flip
Run
him the
away from
bird and
home.
run away. So he kept
Right.
them young, he kept them that way. But I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like, okay, there needs to be a balance there that I think my brother perhaps may have missed, because now, as a now his daughter is 20, and now she's like, I don't I don't want to get my own apartment. Like, that's crazy. Like, I don't want to do
I
that.
know.
Like, I want to stay at home.
I
you
know
know
a lot of people. I know a lot of people like that. My nieces and
yeah,
nephews, and I've heard their conversations. I don't want to grow up.
no, I don't want to
I
grow
want to
up.
be a
I
kid.
don't.
I want to be a
Yeah,
kid. It's
yeah,
like, and you
because they
look
got
at
it
some of
all.
the adults, they regress to kid-like behavior. There's a lot of adults that regress to kid-like behavior in society today, and the toxicity. And people say, well, what's wrong with that? They're just, showing their individuality. There's nothing wrong with that, but at a certain level, you you are expected to have a place in life where you're passing along experiences for the generation to come to guide them to be better. Because if
Yeah.
we regress, then we're just passing along, hey, we're just stuck in time.
hmm
You agree or disagree?
No, I agree. I think it's just,
Well,
man,
don't
yeah,
just agree with me. I mean,
yeah. No, I know
don't
that, but
love
I know
bomb
I
me right now. Don't love bomb me.
don't love my no, no, but I do agree. I mean, I do agree, though. I mean, I think
Yeah,
it's just a different time, like my brother, I think he raised his kids like that because he was afraid that they would leave him. So he
right.
made it very cushiony for them. And now they don't want to leave. She's 20. She's away at college now, so that's as far as she's gone. She's away at college.
Right.
But she was very strategic as to where she went to college. She went to college back in my hometown. So she flew the nest, but
So
not
she's
really.
here?
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
here? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah, she's there. And so, and she graduates in May. She graduates in
That's
May
awesome.
with
That's
her,
awesome.
with her associates. But, yeah, she doesn't want, she cried when she was 20, when she turned 20 in February this past month, as she turned
Yeah.
20, and she cried, and I didn't know how to relate to that. And I think that, it's just, I think adolescents now, they're
So
just
do
under
you
a lot of
do you
different
do you
pressures than what
believe
we
that
were.
do you believe that the fact, I mean, I'm not trying to wish any ill on your niece or anything like that, but do you
hmm
believe that is a point of reference to kind of intervene so that you help her grow into the woman she needs to be, or do you
Heck
believe
yeah.
that,
No,
or do you believe,
I'm a nosy aunt. I am a nosy aunt. I am a nosy aunt. And we've always told Naomi, she's got to have one adult. And so if there are any teenagers listening, or moms out there, if y'all are listening, you have teenagers. What we have said and what has worked out for our family very well is that, we've asked the kids, you have to have one adult that you trust. You pick the adult. but that adult, you that's who you're going to tell your secrets to. Doesn't have to be mom, and it doesn't have to be dad, you know.
Exactly.
And so what my niece has done with that is that, and there's no judgment, right? We are the entrusted adult. So if there are things that Naomi quite doesn't know about boys, so she comes to me with all of the boy problems. With all, because she's a teenager, she's got boy problems, and then she'll go like to my sister with all of her academic problems. So she has trusted adults for different things. Now, Naomi, knows, that, I will only tell her parents if she is in danger, but I will tell
Right.
her, hey, I have to tell, your dad this or your mom this, like she called me. I hope she doesn't listen, but she called me a couple of weeks ago. Well, last week actually. It was last week, and she was saying, "Hey, there's this guy, and he is asking me, like I think he likes me, and he asked me to go eat, and I just don't know if I want to go." So she was going through this whole thing like, oh, does he like me, blah blah. Now I just revealed to y'all, I don't feel that my niece has had a lot of real world experiences, and I
Well,
don't
what
want
did
her
you
going
say? What did you
with
say?
like, so here's my advice to her, because I'm like, hey, like I gotta keep it simple with Naomi, right? Because I don't want her, I can't shame her for experiences she hasn't had. And at the same time, as an aunt, I don't want her
Right.
going with the first guy that says hello to her either. So here's what I told her. I said, Naomi, y'all are gonna laugh. I said, Naomi, when a guy asks you, do you want to go eat? Lunch or dinner, doesn't matter. Do you want to go eat? The only question you should be asking yourself is, are you hungry? That is it. You do not read into it. If a guy asks you to go eat, you ask yourself, are you hungry? If you're hungry, you go with him. You do not read into the situation. He is hungry. He doesn't want to eat alone. So he's asking you to come with him. Keep him and have conversation with him while you guys enjoy a meal. Period. That's not your Prince Charming. That's not your forever love. That does not mean you're going steady. That does not mean he's going to propose next week. Like, you read too much into it. Men are very easy, for the most part, are very easy to figure out.
You got the easy
You
part right.
you
I mean,
gotta you look at their you don't pay attention to what they are saying. You pay attention to what they are doing.
but at the
You
same
know.
time, if she doesn't know him very well, should she be a little um apprehensive? Like, let's say she doesn't know him well. Let's just say they got a class together, and she doesn't know him, but she knows him. Should she
Yeah.
be a little apprehensive? And this is for anybody because a lot of people are into. They watch true crime. They watch all these abductions and all these killings and all these dorm room things and all this stuff.
Hmm.
It's in the
Well,
back of
these
your
are all. So where Naomi is, just to give the audience perspective a little bit, it's a small junior college. The,
right,
the
right.
the kids that are
It's
around,
almost like a high school in
yeah, and
some of
the yeah, and so the kids that are typically are at that particular college there, all of them, there's just a handful that have vehicles. Okay. Not everybody has a vehicle. My niece doesn't even have a driver's license. So she doesn't even have a vehicle. She doesn't even have a driver's license. So when they go when at what she was talking about, hey, do you he asked her to, let's go get something to eat. Let's go get something to eat meant going to the CAC, basically the cafeteria there at their college. So they weren't
okay, right.
necessarily, because the athletes and everything, they don't have vehicles. Everybody's
Well,
there
it
on
would be a little
scholarships
different if he
practically.
said, let's get some DoorDash and come back to my dorm room and
Yeah,
watch.
that would be different, right? Yeah. And I think if she were to ask me, what do you think about that? I would be like, Naomi, you're putting yourself in a situation. Why are you going to his stinky room? Like, you're not going to go to his stinky room. Like, y'all can go to the day room and eat, like, you don't need to be in his room. He doesn't need to be in your room. You don't know him like that. You don't know. He hasn't earned that privilege, like, you don't need to be in his space. So,
Gee, I
but
mean,
those are
let me
conversations,
ask
though.
you. No, 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 no. I'm playing the other side of the coin because what if the
Yeah.
guy is a nice guy and generally, he wants to like, just hang out with her and eat. What's wrong with that?
I think that a genuinely, if a nice guy, if he's
Nobody
he,
wants to eat
he's
in the
if he's an
cafeteria.
if he's a nice guy, I don't think he would. I don't think he would put Naomi in that situation to begin with if he was nice. Because if you stop and you think about it, if you're a nice guy, then then having a female that you don't know very well, or you're just getting to know, like in the beginning, right? You coming off and being like, hey, come to my dorm. I've got DoorDash and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Whoa,
Well, okay,
like that. Yeah.
let me reel it back a little bit, okay? Come to my dorms to the day room area where we can chill, eat the food, where we're not in such a confined formal environment like the cafeteria.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Naomi does that now. They go to each other's dorm, the day rooms, and hang out and watch movies and stuff, but yeah, yeah, for sure, going to people's rooms and stuff like that, I mean, has she gone? I don't. I would say no because I just know her, you know, uh, but yeah, I mean, I think that
So,
she should
so
know better than to do that.
let's jump a couple. Let's go to the 30-year-olds here, 30 and 40-year-olds. They've gone through the college phase. They've gone through, let's say they've probably gotten married. They've gone through dating. They've been cheated on. They've been dumped. They've been, they might be verbally battered. I mean, they have all these war scars, right?
Yeah.
How do you go from that toxicity to ever living again? I mean, how would you recommend somebody who, because I hear all the time, we were married for 10, 15 years, and then one day he said he doesn't love me anymore. He's in love with the 20-year-old secretary at his job, he left me for her,
Hmm.
whatever. How do
Hmm.
you get beyond those scars? And because there's two questions, okay? That question, and the second one is this: do you believe that a woman can get unjaded once she becomes jaded?
Yeah.
Okay, answer the first one first. How does she
Uh,
get beyond the trauma?
I think. Well, so we lose ourselves, right? I think for some people, not everyone. Everyone's journeys are very different. But if we're just going to talk just in the typical sense, if you're the recipient of your partner leaving after 15, 20 years, the thing about it is that when they want to leave, I would let them go, like, bye. But that's my personality. Like, I don't care. I'm just, is it going to hurt me? Yeah, it's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt deeply, but I don't want to. If you don't want to be there, then I don't want you there, like, but I think that's the time when you really need to, when I would advise anybody, it doesn't matter if it's male or female, that doesn't matter. I would advise the person, step back, right? We got to step back. You got to step back, way back. Look at, look at what were you responsible for in that relationship and where did you fail? Because yeah, we can sit here and be like, well, he this, he that, blah blah blah, da, da, da. He left the secretary, blah blah blah. But okay, set all that aside because we can't control any of that. You can only control you. You can't control the other person and what the other person's gonna
Do
do
you
and all
find
that.
that people get selfish in relationships after? they're with somebody for a while?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you
I think
think that
people get
they could
lost.
go ahead?
I think people get lost because I think that, I see it all the time, in my work, I work with the moms and the kids and everything. And so one of the things that I remind young moms of, and young, I'm not talking about chronological age. I'm just talking about at that time when they've had their baby, let's say for the first time, so
Right.
I try to tell them like, hey, you need to set uh bedtime for your child needs to be 8 o'clock at night. And so at first they're a little bit apprehensive, like 8 o'clock, Carla, like that is so early. Like you have got to be kidding. And then I go into you need time for yourself. If your child goes to bed at 8, they're going to be asleep by about 8:30, which their brain needs the rest, to be honest. That is a normal sleep time. But now, I didn't say you the adult, you mom need to be in bed at 8:30. I said your child. So what happens at 8:30 once that child is off in la la land and asleep? Now you get to take that hat off of being a mom, you get to put the hat on of being a wife. And now you get to enjoy a conversation, an adult conversation with your husband, your boyfriend, your partner. You get to, maybe have a late dinner. You get to now maybe watch a movie together. You get to
Well,
now spend that quality time. Because if you don't, right? If all you're worried about is I got to be a good mom, I got to be a good dad, and you involve yourself, you're going to lose yourself. You're going to
but
lose your
also at the
partner.
same time, also at the same time, you're making some great points. Also at the same time, that is not a time to vent to one another. Because if you waste all your moments of connection griping, you're not connecting. You're just slinging stuff at each other, hoping the other
Yeah,
person
that is
will.
supposed to be like quality time. How was your
Of
day?
course.
How was your, yeah,
But
you want that quality
how many
time.
people are gonna be like, so I mean, most people don't even know how to start a conversation in 2026.
Exactly.
They don't.
Exactly. And that goes back to you never stop dating your partner. You don't stop dating them. Because your child, when they're little, right? When they're little, your child doesn't know the difference between a Friday night and a Monday night. So, but if you have them in the routine of going to bed at 8 o'clock, it's easy to find a babysitter to come and you go out, even if it's just to go get ice cream. I'm not saying you got to go out, get drunk at a bar. I'm saying, you know, keep finding each other. You got to have time for yourself. Your
And that
husband or
that
wife has to have
mhm,
time.
that is some great advice as well, because whether you have children or whether you don't, you have to find a way to connect once you unconnect, playing a
Hmm.
different role that you play throughout your day.
Yeah.
If you're always the employee when you come home, what's your husband or wife, what do they really have in common with your work? That's your work.
Yeah.
They're not gonna want, I mean, they'll listen, but after a while it becomes so monotonous that you just don't want to hear about work anymore.
Yeah.
And
And that's
then
where you have to have ththose honest conversations. So we have I'm a social worker, right? That's one of my degrees. So there's Renee Brown. I don't know if the audience has heard about Renee Brown. She is a doctorate in as a social worker. She has her doctorate degree, and she talks about relationships. And one of the things that I learned in listening to her is that I had the mindset, my fault. I had the mindset of, you know what, it's 50-50, 50-50. And in reality, though, it's not 50-50. It is whatever gets us to that 100. So if I go to my partner and I've had a bad day, at work, I've got whatever's going on with me, I should be able to look at my partner and go, you know what, I got like 20 today. I'm at a 20. because I had a bad day. I'm at a 20. So then your partner's like, hey, man, I got you. I'm at an 80. Together, we got the 100. You know what I mean? So that means that if I know, if you know that your partner is at a 20, then you know what? Hey, we're not going to cook dinner tonight. Don't worry about dinner. Let's go get pizza. Let me take over some of this stuff.
But you
In
know,
another light, but that goes both ways, right? That goes both ways, because your partner can come to you and be like, you know what? I am at like a 10 today.
but
Okay, then that means I
hold
got
on,
to dig deep and get that
time out.
90,
But
for
we're
both
getting
of us to
into
be at
you're
100,
you're
and that
talking.
can go every day. Every day it's going to be different, but you have to be able to communicate with your partner and tell them where you're at, because people have bad days. People have bad days. We
Time
may
out.
not want to recount and relive that bad day, but we do need to let your partner know, because you're not always going to be at 50%. But
But honestly,
and your it's it, one person can't carry the relationship. Your wife can't be the one that is always at 90, and you're just given 10. Like, that's never going to work. In the long run, that's not going to work. So you have to be able to be like, hey, and so she talks a lot about that, about a lot about the responsibility of how her and her husband, communicate,
okay,
with them, and how some days it was a pizza night, because you're spent, so yeah, so I think, communication is definitely key, but we have to foster and create that atmosphere. And so that's kind of what I do as a social worker when I talk to young parents, is that I got to give you that time back, because you can't be 100% always a mom. And so that, because that is so unrealistic. A woman can't be, oh, I'm going to be the best mom there is. That's all I'm going to be. I'm going to be all about my kids. If you are all about your kids, then therefore you don't have anything to give to your husband, or your
okay,
partner,
okay. Hold on a second. Hold on a
so,
second.
for reference's
All
sake,
right,
we'll just
Jay,
use the husband and wife kind of
Jay,
scenario, but it doesn't have to be that. But, so
Jay.
you have to stop, and you have to balance yourself. You can't be 100% at something. We want to be good parents, we want to be a good mom, but when the child is asleep, you baby, you just clocked out as a mom. Like, you can clock out. Like, the baby the baby is asleep, or the adolescent or whatever, there. Now it's time.
Hello.
Hey, let's talk about us. Where are you? Where are you emotionally? What, do you want to talk about work? Do you not want to talk about work? Do you want to just sit here? Do you want to play, Uno together? I mean, how can you reconnect with your spouse? Because you both of you can't be 100% at something, because then you're going to lose that. And that's what ends up happening a lot in the marriages, is that people get neglected. Not that, they're like, oh, I wish she wasn't a good mom, I wish she would pay attention to me. It's not that, but it's more of a just a creating of a balance, because you
All right,
can't just put
all right,
everybody goes to bed at 8 o'clock and you didn't have time to even speak to your partner. That's not
all right,
fair to your, it's not fair to you.
all right.
Moms should be able to have their hobbies, and in the beginning, you kind of have to put that on pause, because yes, you've got little ones, and they you can't do anything until they're asleep. It just goes back to, when can I give that mom the time back? If it's a stay-at-home mom, you're gonna get, during the day, your child is gonna take naps for 2.5 hours, and there's 2.5 hours I'm giving you back. I've got to try to figure out how to help these parents balance their lives, where you can take the hat off of the dad, of the mom, of the parent, hang it up temporarily, and put your hat on of who you are. Whether it's, hey, on Wednesday nights, we're going to go to a late dance class because we like it, or what, we're going to do this, we're going to you have to give that time back to yourselves.
Can
And I
you
think that's what happens.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if you could hear me. I think I was frozen or something. But
Oh, yeah,
I was
no.
gonna ask you, I was gonna ask the audience, I was gonna ask you, we're assuming that the person is healthy. Okay, that's assuming that these two people together are healthy individuals.
Yeah.
If you're with a partner who views you as talking about your feelings or talking about 20% or that and the other, some women are gonna say, suck it up. You're a man. You're not a little boy. You're not wimp. Suck it up. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
there are different modalities of people. So I mean, it's whether you want to get to that healthy way of living eventually, because some people love to be dominant in the relationship. They really do. They enjoy being the dominant one. So if they have a submissive partner, most of the time it goes well.
Yeah.
But if you have two people vying for dominancy, a lot of time you just have two people just talking at each other, not really to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to deal with your own issues. Like I've
Yeah.
always heard, what you think of me is none of my business. I've always heard that. That's why I
Hmm.
never ask people, well, what do you think of me? Or what do you think of the way I do this or whatever? I mean, if it's my job, if it's my professional life, I do ask. But as far as asking my partner or somebody that I'm interested in, I don't ever ask that because it's none of my business. Because I'm going to critique it to death and I'm going to instantly start resenting that person for even having those thoughts about me. Because then you're going to get into that whole, well, I do this for you, I do that for you. How can you think this about me? Right?
Hmm. I don't know. That's such an interesting point. It's just so interesting to me because I if I were to think back, and that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm thinking back, and is that, have I ever really asked a partner that I've had in the past, what do you think of me? I don't think I've ever, I don't know that I've ever asked for that opinion. I mean, I definitely talked about my partner with my friends or whatever. This is what I think. But I don't think I have ever asked that that myself. I don't think I've ever asked anybody, like, what do you think? I don't. But
So
it goes
could
two-sided
you
because
handle the critique?
I think it two-sided, because I think that, in our personal life, professional life is one thing, right? I do want, healthy criticism and things like that. But I think, my backboard, like, where I go has always been to my family, right? I have a very close relationship with my sister. My sister's, probably one of my best friends. She knows me very well, and she knows who I am. So, I use that as a gauge, because I think we have to have someone in your life that you use that as a gauge, because you can't, I can't imagine myself, for me, I can't imagine going through life without having kind of that gauge, without having that soundboard, like, hey, let me be real honest with you. He said this, and then I freaking said this. Like, did I mess up there? And then you have the people that you love, that
Because
love you.
some people give you that opinion without even asking for it, though.
Yeah, some people do, but
I
that's where
mean,
you got to be
when
very
they're mad
careful.
at you, that's when you hear about yourself. That's when you hear.
Yeah. And so for me, I always try to tend to have my backboard, which is my sister. I always tend to really, I will, I'm really good at reflecting. I wasn't so good at this until I started going to school and started learning stuff, but I do like to reflect. So I am one of those people that reflects. In the moment, I'm in there, I'm having this argument, I'm having this disagreement with you, and I'm disagreeing, and then afterwards I'm gonna be calling my sister, and I'm gonna be like, hey, this was the situation, and this is what I said, and then this is what he said, and then I said this.
You know,
I'm gonna do that.
I've dated all kinds of of women, all kinds of different women.
Yeah.
I've dated therapists, I've dated doctors, I've dated nurses, all kinds. The worst kind of, not really the worst, but the hardest to date was therapists because it's hard to be yourself because they're constantly critiquing what you're thinking or how your thoughts are coming out. And it was hard. It was hard to really be myself because it was almost like playing chess with them at all times. Like
Oof.
I wasn't gonna let this person get that mental stronghold on me when I had the same ability they had. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult to date somebody who you view as, I don't know, somebody that just cannot be naturally who they are. Like this person, she could never leave her job at work. Like she was a therapist 24/7, and I was like, okay, well, I know I'm less than perfect, so what is she really thinking? And one day, I don't know, I did something, and she said, that's really abusive. And I kind of snapped back. I was like, what? She's like, that's abusive because anytime you withhold anything from somebody, that's abusive.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, Jesus, did you really go there with me? I mean, you couldn't just say, hey, I don't like it when you do that. When you
Mm-hmm.
do that, I feel a certain way, right? You didn't go there with me. You went with the whole that was abusive. That was hurtful, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I don't.
somebody said, you know
Yeah.
what? So somebody said, Kay,
Mm-hmm.
you're abusive when you
Yeah, I think I would be in shock. I'd be like, "What?" I would definitely be calling my sister ASAP, you know. But yeah, I think I don't know, very little of what you just shared. There's so many questions that I would have, but without getting too into deep into it, I would say, you can't. None of us. It doesn't matter who we are, right? None of us need to be with people that we feel that we can't be ourselves. I mean, because your partner, your girlfriend, you're trying them out on. But one of the reasons why we date, and we date, like you were saying, hey, you date all kinds of people because you're trying to find your safe space, regardless of the person's educational background, right? Regardless of that, they have to be a safe space for you to be yourself, because none of us are perfect, so it sounds to me like she wasn't a safe space, if you're, because as a social worker, I see a lot, and if I were to critique, or or do stuff like that, I can't I would be, I would have never fallen in love with anyone. No one would ever fall in love with me, because we can't be doing that, I mean, so without getting too into it, I don't, I feel bad that that happened to you, because obviously this person was not a
don't
safe space,
don't
even though professionally they were a
don't feel
therapist.
don't feel bad for me. It was a learning experience. I wasn't really looking for that to even happen between us. It was just kind of like I don't know. She wasn't anything that was anybody who had ever dated before, that type of individual, and a lot of drunken nights at the bars and dancing and stuff. It just kind of, you know, it went from there. So it's like, you give a person a chance, and when you sober up, you really realize that, this person really doesn't like me for who I am.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, at that point in time, I probably took it a little hard, but looking back on it, I'm glad that she found her one. I'm glad that she got married, and I'm glad that she had children. I'm glad that she's doing well in life. I don't ever
Yeah.
wish anybody who I've crossed paths with in life ill, no matter what went on between us, because it was just a moment in time. If it was to be more, it would have been more. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I dated a girl who tried to choke me out,
Oh,
and
yeah,
she was
no,
just
that's not
so
good.
God.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, we don't want to
if
get
a woman puts their hands on you or a man puts their hands on you, that is a huge red flag. Nobody deserves to be hurt for any reason other than
That's
self
right.
defense. I mean,
Yeah,
but we're
yeah.
talking about toxic people. We're all toxic in some form or fashion. Even going to therapy, you just instantly don't change. So, we're not talking about perfection tonight. At least I'm not. I can only speak for myself. I'm not talking about perfection. I'm not talking about perfect people. I'm talking about people who identify that they are less than perfect and start to progress into becoming a better person for themselves. Because if you're a better person for you, you attract what you put out. If you're a
Hmm.
positive person, chances are you're going to find positive people who enjoy being around you. If you're a negative
Yeah.
person, you're going to attract the helpers. You're going to attract the codependent. You're going to attract the
Mhm.
people that want to save you. And
Mhm.
ultimately, what saviors do is they rise you up enough to get you strong enough to leave them.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that, we attract what we feel we are worthy of. You get out there, and if you have a low self-worth, if you feel like, what, I'm just not a very good person, or you have a low self-esteem, you're gonna attract that, because then you're not gonna go for the people that you feel you deserve, so you also have to be careful of that, so that's why a lot of the therapists and people will tell you, you got to work on you, because that's all you can do. You can't work on anybody else, you can work on you, and work on you, and you have to feel that you are worthy of love, of feeling safe, of all the things. You have to really really feel that and really believe that in order to attract that, because if I feel like all I'm worth is just somebody to live with, to pay bills, I'm going to find that. If all I feel like, what, I'm just not good enough. I need a lot of scolding. I need a lot of this. I'm going to find a man that's going to scold me, that's going to hit me, that's going to do that. So you attract what you feel you are worth, so you know be careful of that, work on yourself, because for the person that said that they had somebody that choked them out, I hope that they had enough self-respect that when something like that happens, like in the moment, right, you could be having a heated conversation, and then the person reaches out and they slap you. Okay, well, you probably didn't see that coming, but I hope that you had enough self-respect that you got up and you exited, and you went no contact with that person, and you left that person behind, because no one, like you were saying, Marty, no one, man or woman, deserves to be hit in any kind of way. There isn't anything that a man or a woman could have a conversation with me and I could agree and say, you know what, oh yeah, she deserved that punch in the face. Like there isn't. There isn't anything that anybody can say where I'm going to agree that violence was appropriate, because it's not. So if
Right.
you find yourself in a relationship like that or in a position like that, I hope that you have the strength within yourself and respect yourself enough that you realize that is not the way we communicate. We don't communicate with our hands in any kind of way. So I hope that the person did get up and leave, and if you find yourself tonight, in those types of situations, send Marty a DM, or something, let us help you get some help, because nobody deserves to ever be in those types of relationships, that people are toxic. Like more, like 12 gauge, like you were saying, we're all a little toxic, because we're all human, we're all human. We're not, but what we are not going to do is excuse, abusive physical behavior. Is
Right.
there's no reason for that. There, you can disagree, and you could be so hot about something that you could say it. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to take a walk around the block. I need to calm myself down. My emotions are all over the place. But if you do not reflect back on yourself, there are people that walk among us that have the inability to do that. They fly off the handle, and they do not have the emotional intelligence to ring it back, and that's what it takes. Is you have to be emotionally stable, and it goes back to our childhood. I can see it back in childhood. It goes back to, you know did were you allowed to experience emotions as a kid, or did you cut were you always cut off? Goes back to, like, did your parents use time out with you, or did they not use time out with you? Like, did you go through those emotions? Did you learn what those emotions are? Because if at I guess what I'm trying to say is, a toddler will explode because they're tiny, they have big emotions, and they're going to explode, and they're going to throw a tantrum because, whatever's not happening that they want it to happen. But realize that if you did not learn how to control your tantrums when you were a kid, you will be an adult throwing tantrums as an adult. And an adult tantrum is going to look very different from a 2-year-old tantrum. You're not going to throw yourself on the floor and start kicking and screaming. But what you are going to be is you're going to say things that you don't mean. You're going to be explosive when you don't need to be explosive. So are you throwing an adult tantrum? Because believe it or not, that happens. Adults throw tantrums. They don't get their way, so they make their way. So it just goes back to that. It just you gotta tend to really understand what your emotions are. You gotta be able to be honest with yourself. You gotta be able to tell somebody, you know what, I can't talk about that right now because I am out, my emotions are out of control, and I gotta gain a little bit of control right now because I'm out of control. So let me put myself out. Let me put myself in timeout. I need to get away from all everybody. I don't need to have conversations with anybody.
Right.
That's self-reflection. You're able to be like, okay, you had a horrible day, whatever the case may be. But there's some people that don't have that. And I would venture to say, if you do not have emotional intelligence and you can't handle your emotions, then you're throwing adult tantrums, because you're not getting your way. And if you scream loud enough, you say it loud enough, you talk over someone, get into those into those arguments. We've all been in them where we can't even say 2 words because the person's not even willing to listen, and they're talking over us. That is an adult tantrum. They didn't learn that. They didn't learn how to navigate that. If you do not learn how to navigate that as a toddler, that's going to follow you into your adolescence. That's going to follow you into your 30s, into your 40s, into your 50s. So that's why we end up seeing people, that we love, and we end up seeing them, oh, they're alone at a very late stage in their life. You know, did they ever have emotional intelligence? Were they ever able to self-reflect on them? Where did I go wrong in those relationships? Where did I, because there's some fault. There's always some fault, because we're not perfect. I could have done this better. So I have even learned that, whenever you're starting to talk to someone, or you're starting to get to know somebody, and they talk about their ex, because we all have exes at this point, we all have past relationships, past loves. No one here, well, for the most part, we're not all virgins today. The question that I ask is, instead of saying, hey, well, what did your ex do? I don't ask, what did your ex do? I don't care what the ex did. I want to know, what did you do and what could you have done different? If a man is able to tell me what they did and what they could have done different, then I know that they have emotional intelligence, because it takes a big person to be
Let
able
me
to
ask you, let
self-reflect that
me ask
way.
you a question. Let me ask you a question though. Do you really have those kind of conversations when you're talking with somebody? Like,
Heck yeah.
you
I
really
haven't.
ask them? You
Well,
really
let's
ask?
say, heck yeah, I have. There,
And what do
yeah,
they
heck yeah.
say?
Heck yeah,
What
I
do they
have.
say? What do they
Heck yeah,
say?
they couldn't tell me. Because the thing about it, and now let's put it into perspective, right? If a man asks me, "Hey, do you want to go get lunch?" I'm going to take my own advice that I gave to my niece. My first question to myself is, "Am I hungry?" Like, I'm going to keep it simple, right? I mean, this is after getting to know somebody. You're getting to know. So this isn't a question I would pull out
Okay,
on the
so
first date,
what was
but
that question that you just asked? What was the first question you were gonna ask
the
a man?
first question first question that I ask when we're talking, right, when we're talking about exes, because you get to that point, to where you're talking about
Okay,
past
what's
relationships.
the question though?
The question is, tell me what you did wrong in that relationship and what you could have done better. What happened? What did you control? Not what your ex did. My ex cheated on me. No, 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 no.
So
I don't care
I
about what your
mean,
ex cheated. I
don't you
want to
think?
know, what did you do wrong?
I mean, the men or people that you date, right? Do they ever just get up and walk off? I mean,
No.
because that's a deep conversation right
That's
there.
a
Like,
and exactly. And that's what I was getting at, right? That's not a conversation that I have on the first date, or
I
even
was
on the
gonna
second
say,
date, or even
if
on the
you asked
third
that
date,
question within 5 minutes, I'd be like, the
Yeah.
steak sucked here. I'm
I
out.
have to know, because I could tell you what I did in my last one. I mean, I
But
could
I
tell you
mean,
where I went
honestly,
wrong, you know.
let me ask you a question, okay? Let me ask you a question here. The person you are right now
Mhm.
surely is not the same person that you made mistakes with your ex with, right?
Right. Right.
I'm not the same person who made mistakes with some of my exes. So if somebody would ever ask me that, well, what was your part in it, or what did you add to the conflict? I'd have to
Yeah.
say, well, at that point in my life, I added to the conflict by not giving a shit, honestly, by not caring, because I figured that, you know what, the argument was going to be there regardless of what my answer was. So I could say my part in it was this, there was still going to be an argument because it was not good enough for the other person. And that's being honest. That's being honest.
Mhm.
But if
Yeah.
somebody doesn't want to hear that honesty, they're going to be like, well, you still had to do something. Nobody goes without fault. And then be like, okay,
Mhm.
well, they're continue to dig. Let me see. Okay, well, I got bored of the relationship, so I started looking elsewhere. I
Mhm.
started, joining dating sites. I started, texting exes. I started talking to people on Facebook, whatever.
Mhm.
I still was in a relationship. I didn't cheat, but I was
Mhm.
looking elsewhere just in
Mhm.
case this relationship went south. Because at that moment in time, it felt like it was going south. Some
Mhm.
some sometimes you don't fight for something that you have to fight for. If I mean to be as simple as possible, not to be long winded or anything, sometimes you don't fight for what you should fight for. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Sometimes you
Mhm.
let you let people walk away that maybe you shouldn't have let walk away. Maybe you should have fought for them a little harder. Maybe you should have tried to get to know them instead of critiquing, how they ate their oatmeal, or how they take 3 hours to order from a freaking drive-through menu. I mean, things like that. Is that really, when it's all said and done, is that gonna make or break a relationship? If it's that, if it's that simplistic, then you don't have a relationship. If you're so worried about losing them, you don't have them.
Right.
There's a lot of people that are so
Yeah.
worried about losing
Mhm.
the person they're with, they don't even have the foundation. They built that on
Mhm.
quicksand.
Yeah. And I think too, so we got to think about it this from this perspective. One of the reasons why I asked that question is because of the trauma that I suffered. So with my ex, this person has been in the same relationship. The only difference is that they've had different partners. So what I mean by that is that had I have asked some of these deep questions, not on the first date, but as you're getting to know someone, if I would have asked some of these questions in the beginning, I would have gotten a big eye opener. I hope that I would have gotten a big eye opener to realize, get your stuff, Kay, and run. Because this
What if
person
they tell you, I don't?
continued. Well, what I'm getting at is this person, this in particular person, continued to make the same mistakes over and over and over again and never learned from their mistakes. So then here I was. I'm now, relationship number whatever you want it to be, you know, and in hindsight, after the love bombing, after all, because remember, this person love bombed me, from the beginning. I didn't realize that was happening to me. But then once I started to really open my eyes, I started to really think for myself, and I starting to really analyze everything. And what I found was that this person has had the same relationship, but just different participants. They hadn't moved in life. So I don't want to make that mistake again. And it's not that, we want to criticize, it's not that we want to criticize. What I want to know is, did you learn? Are you a better person from that tragedy? Because
Okay,
I can tell you that,
they're
from
asking you
mine, I
questions.
am, like I experienced something horrible. My ex was not the best, but then I can't control what that person did. I can control what I did. Where did I go wrong? Oh, I gave them the recipe. I allowed myself to be love bombed. How can I prevent that from happening in the future? What was lacking in me that I allowed that person to do that to me and I didn't recognize it? You
Right.
know, and then another thing is, a lot of it had to be, I had to get reassurance, from others, of to no, Carla, you're on the right path. You're doing this or you're doing that, because you tend to doubt yourself, and you want to make sure. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that continue to do the same things and then wonder why they're getting the same outcomes, and they don't ever change because
You
they
know,
don't believe in change, or
I can. I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's making a lot of sense to me. It really is. I'm
yeah.
sitting over here, and I'm thinking to myself, at 54, if I was to actively be dating, okay, um, I would be like, I wouldn't have the energy for some of these conversations. I wouldn't want these conversations. I don't know why. I guess I don't know. It's like, to me, it seems like, by a particular point in time, whether there's going to be more to the friendship, if the friendship's going to evolve into a potential relationship. I've been on dating sites. I've been done all that crap. You know, women women are very shallow at times. Not all. but there are some very shallow women, and men are as well. Um, but what I've learned in what I'm trying to say is who has that much time for myself? You know what I mean? I don't have all that time. I'm gonna either, it's either gonna click or it's not. Like, I can tell, like if somebody talks more about movies or talks about, they're constantly reciting music lyrics or, just the conversation is not with any substance. Okay, that's friend. That'll be a friend. Now, if the person brings an intellectual conversation where it doesn't feel like, it's forced, okay, I'll listen. I'll even go, hang out, call, whatever. Now, if a person showed their vulnerability to me, and I'm not talking about being vulnerable to me, I'm talking about being vulnerable so that I can see that vulnerability, so that they're not scared to show that vulnerable side, that I can show it as well, then I know that there's potential there. Because I've been with all kinds of different types, from A to Z. And the ones who never cared enough to see the vulnerability and all they focused on was their own, wasn't worth a damn.
Mm.
I'm just speaking
Yeah.
from myself. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, one thing I do know for certain as well is I don't want to get into that mind game with people because I can mind fuck somebody really bad if I wanted because I know how to do it. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I studied these people. It's kind of like a serial killer studying how to catch a serial killer. You learn how to do these things, then you just flip it around. It's easy to do. If I start to do that with a person, I've been very bad in some of my lifetime, and I've done that. I've manipulated, lied, stole, all that crap. Pushed and pulled, ghost for a little bit, and then come back and be like, "Hey, how are you? Haven't talked to you in a while. Wonder how you doing? Blah blah blah," type stuff. But now I'm just me. I'm just consistent with who I am. If somebody desires to talk to me, I'll talk to them. The toxic isn't there anymore. You know why it's
Yeah.
not there? You know why it's not there?
Mm.
Because self actualization replaced it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've really
Wow.
got, we've really gotten deep tonight. So I hope our
Mm-hmm.
audience was able to to keep up because we talked about a lot. And this could be a series that could be like almost 6 months worth of training type lecture. It's something
Yeah.
that you don't get in, 2 hours or an hour and a half. We
Yeah.
kind of hit the high points, and if you are in a toxic relationship, if someone is doing the push and pull, stop pulling back. Let them go. Start pulling yourself to you. I had a therapist that I was going to see for a year. She told me the best and the most meaningful relationship you could ever have is with yourself. And I'm not being dirty.
Yes.
I'm not saying that in a funny way. I'm just saying, the best relationship you could ever have is to finally know who you are, where nobody else can take you somewhere that you don't want to go without permission, where you learn to spot the signs quicker than you used to last year, because hopefully you are learning. You are learning to take a look at who you are, who you're willing to become. And don't use that line, I'm working on myself, while you're still dating losers behind the scenes. That's never going to help you heal. And it's okay to be alone sometimes after things go bad. It's okay to heal. You need it before you go forward because otherwise, the next person is just going to be a rebound. You're going to end up
Mhm.
hurting them and you're going to experience more pain as well because you're just band aiding the pain from the trauma using another person's love because you can't love yourself at that point.
Yeah. Here, here. Well said.
It's very funny that you and I kind of got into the counseling field, the therapy stuff, the criminal justice side of it all. I didn't have a clue that you went that direction. And then later on, when we reconnected and you told me about that, I was like, that is freaking weird. We should have known by all those hours of therapy we spent every night on the phone having therapy sessions.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Crazy, crazy ass kids. But
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed your commentary, your thoughts, very deep, very insightful, very genuine. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before I sign off? Because I'm kind of tired.
Yeah, no. I mean, I just, thank you for having me on. It's been a minute and everything, and hopefully, I get to come on again, and I appreciate everything. And hopefully your audience will, they'll reach back out to you, and if anybody has questions or needs help, this is what we're here for. But I appreciate you having me on, and I wish everybody have a great wonderful weekend and get some rest. And thank you for spending an hour and a half or however long we were on the live
Yeah,
with us. It's definitely I enjoy it. And let me know when I can come back on again, and we'll talk different topics. But yeah,
yep,
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
most definitely. Be safe. Be safe out there. Get some rest this weekend yourself, and I will definitely reach out to you. Thank you for being up here. Got a little bit of
Absolutely.
something to say to the audience before I sign off, so I'm going to remove you from the stage. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, one thing I do want to say to you guys is we merely were just talking. We were not giving any kind of counseling advice or anything like that. Anything that you could view as well, this person said this or this person said that. We're merely giving suggested thoughts. And also, if you have an idea for an investigative podcast, feel free to type it in the comments or find a video and on the channel that you want to just leave a comment. I'll see it. I do have a Facebook page. Let me put the link in here if y'all want to go join my Facebook um 12 gauge investigative page. I will put it on here. I have been talking with other guests to hopefully come up on the panel and talk a little true crime in the future. But I like to keep it fresh. I like to talk about different topics. So there's my 12 gauge investigative Facebook page. If you want to add me, that's fine. I don't mind that. Thank you so much for you guys in chat being respectful with your questions, with your thoughts. And always know if you watch this on replay, I was very appreciative. Hit the like button, even if you don't like the topic. Hit the like button, not for the topic, but the mere fact that there is something out there that could potentially help you or anybody else with a perspective from a professional side of it, not just people dominating the mic with opinion. Okay? I like that. Purely entertainment purposes only. The views expressed here are not indicative, predicative, or should be construed as advice for a specific problem. Please seek mental attention as needed. And if you're in a dire situation, please do call 911. Thank you so much. As I always say, Maestro, cue that music.